Michelle Obama gave a speech at the DNC, and she made a reference to how slaves built the house that she now lives in. And Fox News' Bill O'Reilly decided to do a little segment on that. And, it's nice to know over at Fox News that even historical crimes against humanity have a silver lining. And Bill O'Reilly's going to tell us what it is. Let's go ahead and listen.
Finally tonight, factor tip of the day. As we mentioned, Talking Points memo, Michelle Obama referenced slaves building the White House and referring to the evolution of America in a positive way. It was a positive comment. The history behind her remark is fascinating.
Fascinating. The history
behind her remark.
Behind the slaves building the White House. It's here comes what he considers fascinating history. Fascinating.
George Washington selected the site in 1791 and has presently laid the cornerstone in 1792. Washington was then running the country out of Philadelphia. Slaves did participate in the construction of the White House. Records show.
First of all, not only did they participate in building the White House, they mined the limestone and the marble with which it was made. Slaves mined the limestone and marble, and they built the White House. The stuff that was made out of came from slaves, and then slaves helped build it.
Yeah, they participated.
But they participated.
You participate in a party or a get-together.
In a parade, you participate.
Yeah.
You don't participate in slave labor. You are forced into it. That's not a participation. That's forced slave labor. Oh, I'm participating in forced slave labor. So it's funny all the words, for whatever reason, that Bill is going to use in this segment to soften the effects of human slavery. I don't know what's in it for him to do this, but there is, right? Okay, here we go.
400 payments made to slave masters between 795 and 1801. In addition, free blacks, whites, and immigrants also worked on the massive building. There were no illegal immigrants at that time. If you could make it here, you could stay here.
At least the immigrants who worked on the White House weren't illegal. Just ask the Native Americans about their problems with the illegal immigrants. Am I right? Okay.
In 1800, President John Adams took up residence in what was then called the Executive Mansion. It was only later on they named it the White House. But Adams was in there with Abigail, and they were still hammering nails. The construction was still going on. Slaves that worked there were well fed and had decent lodgings provided by the government.
Yes, of course, of course.
They were well fed. And they lived in housing provided by the government. Those fucking welfare moochers. That's what it makes it sound like, right? They were well fed and they lived in housing provided by the government. Decent housing provided by the government. You know how well they took care of their slaves and their housing, I'm sure.
I think he left out a comma. They were well fed.
They were well fed. Oh, they're always those slaves were always looking for a handout from the government, weren't they? The slaves.
Well, they were incapable of taking care of themselves, and that's what we had to.
And it turns out Thomas Jefferson had to constantly deal with slavery human resources because of the sexual harassment at the workplace. Well fed. That's just unbelievable. The fact that they were well fed and had decent housing provided by the government. The degradation of human bondage goes down so much easier on a full stomach. Well fed. Well fed and decent lodging. Yes, Bill thinks the slaves received the Michelin Guide food scraps and 5-star wooden shed lodgings. Yeah, well fed. I'm going to look into this, see how well fed the slaves were. Well fed. They were well fed. First of all, I don't think anybody was well fed back then, except super well fed. They didn't even have refrigeration yet. Well fed. Okay. But, as Bill says, slaves come in, White Houses go out. You can't explain it. You can't explain it. You can't explain that. He's got more to say. Right now, you just know Bill O'Reilly and Lou Dobbs are sitting around thinking about the slaves building the White House going, you kidding me? Why are they complaining? Look, they got fire stoves. They think they're poor. They got fire stoves. Look, they got washboards. And they think they're poor?
They have clay things to put their food in.
Okay.
Which stopped hiring slave labor in 1802. However,
He says the government stopped hiring slave labor. Okay, you don't hire slaves. Do you know what you do? You enslave slaves. And then you beat them into working for you. You know what their payment is for working? They don't get beaten. That's their payment. You don't hire They stopped hiring slaves. You don't hire a slave. You enslave them into human bondage and then beat them into working for you. What I don't understand. I still can't get over the decent lodging. Oh, yeah, our fellow human beings were being raped, beaten, and killed as slaves, but at least they were staying at the Days Inn. Right. And then they stopped hiring them, as if slaves went and applied for the job. Hey, we need some more slaves.
Every morning they received a continental breakfast whipping.
Yes. And you know, Fox News doesn't see what's wrong with seeing human beings as personal property. Just ask Roger Ailes. Took the glasses off for that one. Really wanted to land that one. Sure, when O'Reilly talks about the horrors of slavery, he looks for the positive. Well-fed and decent lodging. Sure, African received affirmative action and on-the-job training. So what's the big deal? Okay, here we go.
Did not forbid subcontractors from using slave labor. So Michelle Obama is essentially correct in citing slaves as builders of the White House, but there were others working as well. Oh. Got it all? There will be a quiz. Just put the...
What was the point of all that? Well, I don't understand what the point... Oh, that's the fascinating history behind how slaves were used to mine the materials for the White House and built the... That's fascinating how we use slave labor who were well-fed and given decent housing. Moochers. The government provides for slaves, always has. What is... They were well-fed and given decent housing. The slaves were. You know, us, when we have slaves, we're very human about it, you know, unlike when ISIS has slaves. What the...
And thank goodness they have the payment records from the people who owned them.
Yeah, thank God.
So we know that there was quality, control involved. They paid, the owners of the slaves.
The contractors, the pre-Halliburtons.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The contractors who had the slaves. Oh, boy.
Well, you guys got to remember how much a great effect that the legacy of slave ownership has on rich white broadcasters.
Oh, sure.
Throughout history, they had to give up their slaves. And they had to figure out a way to survive without...
They had to change the whole economy.
Yeah, and I look at them today. They host TV shows.
Yeah, it's not like... They bounce back.
Women can complain about sexual harassment nowadays. It's tough. There's a major... It's a huge problem, the legacy of slave ownership.
The legacy. The Tufts legacy.
Yeah, this is Fox News 200 years ago. It's like the Onion occasionally does this, where they'll make like an Onion newspaper for 1840.
This is how he would report on the building of the White House. Yeah. Hey, those slaves are well-fed and given decent housing. Quit crying.
The right-wing spin machine
slaves.
Serving the owners.
Slaves.
The oldest story in the history. The propagandists work in every era.
But you know what? That Fox News, they have news in their title, so you know it's news.
Yeah.
And, Hillary Clinton said that Megyn Kelly's a superb journalist. So they're doing some great work over there, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're doing good.
The more you read about this, the more disturbing it is. PolitiFact reported the records reflect 385 payments between 1795 and 1801 for Negro hire, a euphemism for the yearly rental of slaves.
The rental of slaves.
Right? And then, it
so
gets...
they wouldn't pay the slaves. They would pay a guy who owned them.
Yes. That's our country.
Yeah.
That's what we built on. And then they continue by saying never mind. Move on.
Okay.
Well, he's talking about them like they're animals. I mean, that's literally what slavery was treating someone else like a horse.
Right.
And what you keep your horses fed
Right.
and housed so they can keep being a slave.
Keep being a workhorse.
Just keep doing whatever you do that's literally what they did. That's how they treated people.
And like we're thinking that they have a regular work week.
No,
According to this, it's talking about right.
Yeah.
We're thinking regular work week.
I'm thinking 8 hours a day. They got paid overtime.
They had a snack break.
They had two breaks and a lunch.
Holidays, they get
Right?
triple time.
No.
Well,
They work from sunrise to sunset. So that's a part of the quiz, O'Reilly.
Wow, sunrise to sunset. They were well fed and well housed.
They were rented out by Hertz Rent-A-Slave, and you know.
Can you imagine that, working all day, hard labor, no pay, and no future? No life. You're not building towards a house or for your grandkids. You just have to work all day, and then they'll feed you, and then that's it. You don't get to have a family. You don't get to have a house.
Kind of like now.
Instead of saying we should be ashamed as a nation that this ugly cancer or maybe this stain on our history is there, he says, why do they keep complaining?
It wasn't all so bad.
Michelle Obama failed to mention that they got food.
She failed to mention that they got on-the-job training.
And they hired stonemasons from Europe or something to do. It's like, come on.
This is considered a news channel.
Well, and he's reinforcing some narrative inside his viewers' minds that black people aren't grateful.
And they're complainers.
Yeah.
And we took care of them even when they were slaves. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
What is the big deal?
We took away their freedom, but we gave them dinner.
Again, it's the inability to anything we do to see it, to even have the same standard as we have towards someone. If someone else enslaves people, they're barbaric, they're backward cultures. We have to wipe them out. When we have slaves, it's like we were nice to them.
We were nice to them.
We were nice to them. You know how I know we were nice to them? A news channel told me. News channel. That's a news channel.
Sometimes they got to work in the shade.
Sometimes.
The ones, especially after they built the roof.
Jesus Christ. It's a great America.